I was 62 years old the night Sophie Morrison walked into my bar. I'd been to war, buried brothers, spent 3 years in the jungle where boys became men or became ghosts. I thought I'd seen everything worth seeing, felt everything worth feeling. I was wrong. The Iron Brotherhood MC Clubhouse sat on Southeast Hawthorne, Portland, Oregon, wedged between a pawn shop and a Vietnamese restaurant that served pho so good it made me cry the first time I tried it. Not the crying kind normally, but that broth that tasted brought me back to Saigon 1968 before everything went to hell. For I learned what a man could do to another man when the rules disappeared. We built the clubhouse in '87. Took us 2 years. Every brick laid by veterans myself, Vince Russo, who'd seen Korea, Tommy Wrench Patterson, who died in '09 from the Agent Orange they swore wasn't killing us. The walls held photographs. Black and white images of young men in uniform standing in rice paddies, deserts mountains. Some of those men were still alive. Most weren't. This wasn't just a bar. It was a sanctuary. A place where men who'd seen the worst of humanity could sit with others who understood. Where you didn't have to explain why certain sounds made you flinch. Where silence meant respect, not judgment. I owned Coleman's garage 3 blocks away. Motorcycles mostly though, I'd work on anything with an engine. Lived above the shop in a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like motor oil and old coffee. My routine hadn't changed in 15 years: work, gym, clubhouse, sleep. No complications, no attachments, no one to lose. Rachel left in 2014, can't blame her. I'd stopped being a husband long before she stopped being a wife. Friday nights at the clubhouse followed a pattern. The angels gathered around 8, 20 to 30 men depending on who was working, who was traveling, who was still alive. We'd drink, play pool, tell the same stories we'd told 100 times before. War stories mostly. The ones where we survived. The ones where we didn't have to explain why we woke up screaming. Vince Russo was already at the bar when I arrived that June night. 74 years old Korean War veteran, gray beard down to his chest. He'd taken shrapnel in his left leg at the Chosin Reservoir. Winter of 1950, 19 years old. The leg never healed right, but Vince never complained. Marines don't complain. Next to him sat Jackson Crow Hayes, 52, Gulf War, sharp eyes that missed nothing. Lean like a whip. He'd been a scout sniper. The kind of man who could sit motionless for 18 hours waiting for a target. That patience translated to civilian life. Crow thought 3 moves ahead. Always, younger guys filtered in. Jake Morrison, no relation to Sophie, though I didn't know that yet. Iraq veteran. Marcus Freeman Jr., Afghanistan. Tommy Chen, same. All of them carrying invisible wounds. All of them trying to find some piece of normal in a world that didn't understand what they'd seen. The music was loud. Classic rock. Creedence Clearwater Revival. Fortunate Son. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. We'd all been fortunate sons once, right up until we weren't. I nursed a whiskey at the bar. Jim Beam. Neat. Same drink I'd been ordering since 1975 when I got back from Hanoi. 3 years in that jungle hell. 6 months as a POW after my chopper went down outside Da Nang. The North Vietnamese weren't gentle, but they taught me something useful: how to survive when surviving seemed impossible. The date nagged at me. June 14th. I tried not to think about it. Tried not to remember. But memory doesn't ask permission. Elena Coleman, born June 14th, 2001. My daughter. The only perfect thing I'd ever helped create. She died on a Tuesday, June 11, 2013. 7 years old, riding her bike in front of our house in Northeast Portland. The drunk driver didn't brake, didn't even slow down. Hit her at 45 miles per hour. She flew 12 feet, died on impact. I was here, at the clubhouse, 20 minutes away, playing pool with Vince, drinking, laughing at some joke I can't remember anymore. Rachel called, screaming. I couldn't understand the words at first. Then I did. Then I understood everything. By the time I reached the hospital, Elena was gone. They'd covered her with a white sheet, so small under that sheet. 7 years old, 73 pounds, loved strawberries, hated broccoli, wanted to be a veterinarian. Gone. Rachel looked at me in that hospital corridor, her face blank, empty. She said 3 words that ended our marriage. You weren't there. She was right. I wasn't. I was drinking with my brothers while my daughter died alone on asphalt, her bike twisted into scrap metal, her shoes scattered in the street. We divorced a year later. Rachel remarried in 2016, moved to Seattle with her new husband, elementary school principal, good man probably, better than me certainly. I stayed in Portland, stopped feeling. Emotions were weakness. Weakness got you killed. Better to be stone, better to be ice. For 15 years, I perfected the art of not caring. Then Sophie Morrison walked through that door. The bolt shouldn't have slid. The clubhouse door locked from inside Friday nights. Members only, no exceptions. But I heard metal scraping, heard hinges protest. The music volume dropped as heads turned. She stood in the doorway, backlit by street lamps. Small, maybe 70 pounds. 8 years old, I'd learn later. Dark hair tangled like no one had brushed it in weeks. Oversized gray hoodie, jeans with holes that weren't fashion statements. The bruises caught my attention first. Professional habit, you see bruises in my line of work. Motorcycle accidents, bar fights, but these were different. Defensive wounds. Dark purple marks on her forearms where someone had grabbed. Hard, often. Her face was pale, cheekbones too sharp, eyes too large for her skull. The look of a child who hadn't eaten enough, hadn't slept enough, hadn't been safe enough. But she wasn't crying, that struck me. 8 years old, walking into a room full of bikers, and she wasn't crying, wasn't apologizing, wasn't doing any of the things a terrified child should do. Her eyes scanned the room, methodical, searching. When her gaze landed on my vest on the Iron Brotherhood patch, something shifted in her expression. Recognition, confirmation. She walked straight toward me. Every conversation in the bar died. Pool cues froze mid-stroke. Beer bottles paused halfway to lips. 27 men watching one small girl cross 30 feet of concrete floor. In Vietnam, we learned to read body language. Civilians, villagers. You had 2 seconds to decide friend or threat. This girl's body language screamed survivor. Shoulders back, chin up, fists clenched at her sides. She'd made a decision and she was executing it with military precision. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough to speak, far enough to run. Her voice cut through the silence. Clear, steady, possible for someone her size in a situation this insane. 2 words at first directed at me. Sir, she said, that one word carrying more weight than it should. Can I follow you home? The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the neon Budweiser sign buzzing on the wall, could hear someone's boot scraping concrete, could hear my own heartbeat, which hadn't changed rhythm under fire in Vietnam, but somehow accelerated now. 27 years of military training kicked in. Assess the situation, identify the threat, protect civilians. I crouched down, slow, deliberate, the way you approach a frightened animal. My knees protested. Old motorcycle accident from '92, shattered kneecap, but I ignored the pain. At her eye level now, I could see more details. Dirt under her fingernails, a healing cut on her lower lip, the way her pupils dilated slightly, fear and determination warring in those young eyes. She was trembling, barely perceptible, the adrenaline of whatever decision had brought her here starting to wear off. My voice came out softer than I'd intended. The tone you'd use with your own daughter if you were lucky enough to still have one. Why would you want to follow us, kid? She didn't answer with words. Instead, she held up a photograph. Her small fingers gripped it so tightly her knuckles had gone white, like she was afraid someone might rip it away. Like this single piece of paper was the only proof she had that her mother had ever existed at all. The photograph was creased, folded and unfolded so many times the paper had gone soft at the edges, threatening to tear along the lines. Faded too. Colors washed out from years in handling and probably tears. But the image was unmistakable. A woman stared back at me from that worn photograph, smiling, strong, eyes full of life and fire. She wore an Iron Brotherhood vest over a Metallica t-shirt, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, one arm slung around someone's shoulder just outside the frame. The vest was authentic. The patch was real. And every man in that bar recognized her instantly. Cassandra Morrison. Cass. She'd been a member from 2012 to 20, rare for a woman to earn a patch in a veteran's MC, but Cass had earned it. She'd served too. Not military, but she'd worked as a paralegal for veterans' rights organizations, fought the VA when they denied claims, helped brothers navigate the bureaucracy that chewed up and spat out men who'd given everything for their country. Cass had ridden with us, stood with us, bled with us when things got ugly, and she died in September 2020. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Vince stepped closer. His hand trembled as he reached toward that photograph, not touching it, just hovering, like he was afraid it might disappear. His voice, when it came, sounded crushed, like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed. Maria's kid. The words barely made it past his throat. Old habit. We'd called her Maria sometimes. Her middle name? She'd preferred it. Then the reality hit. But she died 3 years ago. The girl nodded, just once. A simple confirmation that carried the weight of 1,000 lost days. I was 5, she said. Her voice carried something no 8-year-old's voice should possess. Weight, gravity, the kind of certainty that comes from trauma remembered too clearly. I remember everything. She paused. And in that pause, I felt every man in the bar holding his breath, waiting for whatever came next, knowing it would hurt. I remember her funeral, the flowers, the way people kept saying she was in a better place. A bitter edge crept into her voice. Like that was supposed to make me feel better. Another pause. Longer. I remember the man who married her before she got sick. My stepfather. I remember him crying at the service. Her voice went flat, emotionless. The way people sound when they've said something so many times in their head that it's lost its power to hurt them anymore. I remember when he stopped pretending to be sad. The temperature in that bar dropped 20 degrees. I felt it. The air went cold and sharp like broken glass. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth should have cracked. My fist balled at my sides, every muscle in my body going rigid with barely controlled rage. Around the room, other men shifted. Crow whispered something that sounded like a prayer or a curse. Jake set down his beer with trembling hands. We understood now. Cass Morrison, our sister, our friend, the woman who'd earned her place through loyalty and guts, who'd ridden with us through 3 states, who'd stood shoulder to shoulder with us when things got ugly, who'd proved over and over that family wasn't about blood, but about who showed up when it mattered. Cass had a daughter, and we'd never known. She'd never told us, never brought this little girl around, never asked for help, and now she was dead, and her child was standing in our bar looking like she'd been through hell. The questions crashed through my mind like thunder. Why didn't Cass tell us what happened to this child? Who was this stepfather? What had he done? But I forced the questions down, forced myself to focus on the terrified little girl in front of me who'd somehow found the courage to walk into the scariest place she probably knew. I kept my voice soft, gentle, even though every instinct screamed to find whoever hurt her and make them pay. Why'd you come here, sweetheart? She took a shaky breath, the kind adults take before confessing something they've carried too long, the kind that comes right before the dam breaks. Her small shoulders rose and fell. And for the first time since she'd walked through that door, she looked like what she was, a terrified 8-year-old child who'd been holding on by her fingernails for far too long. Because no one else will tell me the truth. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And because I need help. The story came out in fragments, 8-year-old words trying to explain adult horrors, trying to make sense of things no child should have to understand. Her mother had left behind money, not lottery winnings or anything illicit, honest savings, $247,000, carefully protected, legally willed to her daughter. Cass had worked 2 jobs for years, paralegal during the day, weekend shifts cleaning office buildings at night, saving every penny she could squeeze from a life that didn't give much, building a safety net 1 crumpled dollar bill at a time. The account had 2 people with access, the girl herself, though she was too young to touch it yet, and her stepfather, listed as temporary guardian until she came of age. Richard Caldwell. I committed the name to memory. At first, the girl said her voice going flat. Now he acted kind. For the first few weeks after the funeral, he'd made her breakfast, asked about school, played the part of the grieving husband trying to do right by his stepdaughter. But after Mom died, everything changed. The details came like punches, each one landing harder than the last. Meals skipped as punishment, food locked away, her watching him eat while her stomach cramped with hunger. Locked rooms, her bedroom door fitted with a deadbolt on the outside, trapping her for hours, sometimes overnight. Bruises explained away as clumsiness when the rare neighbor asked. Those neighbors had been told she was slow, sickly, that it was better not to engage with her because she got confused easily. Made up stories, needed special handling. I'd seen this before. Vietnam, villages where men ruled with fists, where women and children learned to be silent, small, invisible. I'd seen it stateside too. Marine buddies who came back different, who drank too much, hit too hard, who turned their homes into war zones. I'd promised myself never again. Never stand by while the strong hurt the weak. And here I was. This girl had been 50 feet away for 3 years. 50 goddamn feet. While I drank my whiskey and told my war stories and pretended the world outside this clubhouse didn't exist. But here's what Richard Caldwell didn't know. Here's what he never even suspected. This 8-year-old girl's far smarter than he imagined, far more observant, far more determined to survive. She'd been listening for months, pressed her ear to doors when he thought she was locked away, memorized phone conversations, stored every word in her mind like evidence in a case she was building against him. She knew about the insurance payout, the life insurance policy he had taken out on her 6 months ago, $500,000. Him as sole beneficiary. She understood what the kid being more trouble than she's worth meant when he said it on those late-night phone calls. She'd heard him tell someone about clearing the way, about handling things this weekend, about how accidents happen to children all the time, and nobody really questions it if you set it up right. My fist clenched so hard my knuckles cracked like gunshots in the silence. The sound made several men flinch. My voice came out like gravel, like broken glass. He was planning to kill you. Not a question, a statement of fact, a recognition of evil that made even these hardened men feel sick. She nodded. The simple gesture carried the weight of certain death avoided by the thinnest margin. I think he was waiting for the right time, she said quietly. An accident. Something believable. She looked up at me, at these terrifying men with their ink and leather and scars. Men who should have frightened her. But Mom told me something before she died, right at the end when it was just me and her in the hospital room. Her small finger lifted, pointing at my vest, at that distinctive patch. She said if I ever got lost, if I ever couldn't find safe people, if I ever needed help and didn't know where to turn to look for this symbol. She traced the patch in the air. She said it means loyalty, protection, family. The word family hung in the air like a prayer. She said the Iron Brotherhood takes care of their own, and that I was one of your own, even if you didn't know it yet. Something shifted in my chest, something I'd kept carefully locked away for 15 years, since the day Elena died, since the day Rachel walked away, since the day I decided it was easier to feel nothing than to feel everything. But standing there watching this tiny broken bird of a child look at me and see a hero instead of a monster, I felt it crack. That wall I'd built, that armor, purpose, real purpose, the kind that comes when an innocent child places their entire life in your hands. Vince's hand landed on my shoulder, steadying me, the way he'd steadied me in a dozen firefights, 100 bad moments. But there was still one question that would change everything. Where do you live, kid? She turned, didn't say anything at first, just turned her small body toward the bar's front window. The one that looked out onto Southeast Hawthorne, where our motorcycles sat parked in a row. She lifted one thin arm and pointed through the smudged glass, past the neon beer signs, across the cracked asphalt street, at a small house with peeling paint and drawn curtains. A house I'd seen 1,000 times without really seeing it at all. There, she said simply, with him. He doesn't know I left. He thinks I'm locked in my room. The men around me stared, just stared. I could see the realization hitting them in waves, each one worse than the last. Some of them had been coming to this bar for 20 years. 20 years of Friday nights. 20 years of parking their bikes in that same spot, walking through that same door, living their lives in this sanctuary. 20 years while a child was being tortured 50 feet away. 50 feet. You could throw a rock and hit that house from where we stood. You could walk there in 30 seconds, and we'd had no idea. My voice went deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that's more terrifying than shouting, the kind that means violence is being considered and calculated and barely held in check. How long has this been happening? 3 years, she said simply, like she was telling me the time. Since the funeral. 3 years. 1,095 days of hell. 1,095 nights of being locked in her room. 1,095 mornings of waking up scared. And we'd been right there, right across the street, close enough to help if only we'd known. But here's what none of them understood yet. The question that should have been obvious but wasn't. Why tonight? Why now, after 3 years of suffering in silence? 3 years of surviving hell alone. 3 years of walking past this bar every day knowing these men were inside. Why had she finally crossed that street tonight? Her face went even paler. Her hands started trembling again. The adrenaline that had carried her this far starting to fail. Reality crashing back in. I heard him on the phone yesterday. Her voice had gone small again. Young again. Scared in a way it hadn't been before. He was in the kitchen. I was supposed to be asleep, but I couldn't sleep because I hadn't eaten in 2 days and my stomach hurt. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking exactly like what she was, a terrified child who'd just run out of time. He told someone he was handling it this weekend, that the timing was right, that he'd been patient long enough and it was time to move forward with the plan. She looked up at me, those big eyes swimming with tears she refused to let fall. That's why I came tonight, because I think he's going to do it soon. Maybe tomorrow, maybe Sunday, but soon. Her voice cracked, and I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know who else to trust. Mom said you'd help. Mom said you'd protect me. She paused, swallowed hard. So I waited until he was drunk enough to pass out, and I picked the lock on my door. He doesn't know I learned how, and I ran. The bar exploded into action. It wasn't organized, wasn't planned, wasn't discussed. It was instinct. Survival mode. Protection mode. Every man in that room moved at once. I was on my phone, calling Detective Elena Ramirez, the only cop we trusted, the one who'd worked with us before. Vince was pulling up contacts. Our lawyer, Karen Chen, the one who'd gotten us out of jams and knew how to work the system. Crow was already at the window, watching that house like a hawk, making sure nobody came out looking for her. Someone locked the bar door from inside. Someone else was clearing a table, making space, and someone I couldn't see who put a leather jacket around the little girl's shoulders because she'd started shaking, the fear and exhaustion finally catching up now that she'd found safety. Before she said anything else, she pulled something from her backpack. A tiny thing, worn and patched. Cartoon characters faded almost beyond recognition. She held out a folder. One of those plastic, expandable folders kids use for school projects. But this one was carefully maintained, organized with tabs and sections. She held it out to me with both hands, like she was presenting something precious and fragile and vitally important. I took it, exchanged glances with Vince, opened it carefully. What I found inside made every man in that bar go absolutely silent. Documents, not just random papers, carefully collected, organized evidence, medical records from school nurse visits, 12 of them, showing injuries dating back 3 years, each one with notes about how the injury occurred. Fell downstairs, ran into door, tripped over toy. Each explanation slightly different, patterns that should have raised red flags, report cards with teacher comments, declining participation, seems withdrawn, possible home issues, concern notes that had apparently gone nowhere, photographs, 37 of them, taken with a disposable camera, the kind you can buy at a drugstore for a few dollars, each one dated in careful handwriting, showing her bedroom door with its outside locks, showing empty cupboards, showing bruises on her own arms held up next to a calendar to prove when they appeared. And at the bottom, sealed in a plastic page protector, like it was the most valuable thing in the world, a letter. The handwriting was unmistakably feminine, flowing and strong despite the shakiness that comes with illness. I'd seen Cass's handwriting before. Birthday cards, notes left on windshields, the backs of photographs from rides we'd taken together. This letter was dated August 12th, 2020, 5 weeks before her death, written when she must have known she was running out of time. My hands shook as I read. To my brothers, Marcus Bear, Coleman, Vincent Russo, Jackson, Crow Hayes. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and Sophie needs you. I married Richard Caldwell 6 months ago. I know it was fast. I know you didn't trust him. You were right not to, but I'm dying and I'm desperate. Sophie needs a father. I hoped, maybe I was wrong about him. I'm leaving this letter as insurance. If Richard hurts her, and God, I pray he doesn't, she knows to find you, Bear. I know you lost Elena. I know you think you failed her. You didn't. You were human. We all fail sometimes. But Sophie needs you to try. One more time. Be the Marine who doesn't leave a man behind. Be the father you wanted to be. I'm trusting you with my daughter's life. Don't let me down. Semper Fi Cass, the letter blurred. My vision going watery. I blinked hard. Marines don't cry. But my eyes burned anyway. Vince's voice came out thick with emotion he wasn't used to showing. You've been collecting evidence. Not quite a question, more like an expression of awe. For how long? 2 years, Sophie replied simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world for a 6-year-old to start building a legal case against her guardian. Since I was 6, Mom taught me to document everything before she died. She said if you want justice, you need proof. She said nobody believes words alone, especially from kids, but they have to believe evidence. Cass had raised a warrior, a tiny 8-year-old warrior who'd spent 2 years preparing for this moment, collecting proof, building a case, surviving hell while simultaneously documenting it for the day she'd finally have the courage to run. I knelt down, put myself at eye level with this remarkable child. My voice came out rough, like I'd swallowed gravel. Kid, your mom was right to send you here. We'll handle this. She looked at me with those big eyes, trusting me the way her mother had, the way Elena had trusted me to be there when it mattered. I wasn't there for Elena, but by God, I'd be here for this girl. He's going to kill me, she said, matter of fact, like she was discussing the weather. This weekend, I heard him on the phone. He said this weekend. Her voice cracked. I think he's taking me hiking tomorrow. To Silver Falls. I think he's going to push me, make it look like I slipped. My fists clenched, every muscle in my body screaming to cross that street, to put my hands on Richard Caldwell, to make him understand what happens when you hurt children. But that would ruin everything. Assault charges, case dismissed, predator walks free. I took a breath, forced myself to think like a Marine, like a strategist. In Vietnam, when we took fire, we didn't freeze. We acted, assess, plan, execute, enemy. Richard Caldwell, threat level immediate, timeline 48 hours. Objective, protect Sophie, gather evidence, neutralize threat, rules of engagement. Can't kill him, can't assault him. Gotta work within the system. Frustrating as hell, but doable. I stood, turned to my brothers. My voice carried command. The tone I'd used as a squad leader. The tone that meant orders were being given and would be followed. Vince called Detective Ramirez. Tell her we need her, now. Vince was already pulling out his phone. Crow document everything, photos, video, written statement. Crow nodded, moving to grab equipment. Jake watched that house across the street. Richard Caldwell. If he moves, you tell me. Jake was at the window before I finished speaking. I looked at Sophie, put my hand on her shoulder. Gentle, the way I used to with Elena. Sweetheart, you did good. You survived. You were smart. You were brave. You were everything your mama raised you to be. I squeezed her shoulder. But you're not alone anymore. You hear me, not alone. She nodded. A tear slipped down her cheek, the first one I'd seen. We're gonna make sure that bastard never touches you again. The angels mobilized with military precision. Crow photographed her bruises, multiple angles, date stamped on his phone, making sure every mark was documented. Vince interviewed her. Gentle questions, recording her answers on video, building a case that would hold up in court. Jake watched the house, radio in hand, ready to alert us if Richard emerged. Someone brought Sophie water, crackers. She devoured them like she hadn't eaten in days. She probably hadn't. Someone else wrapped her in a clean jacket, leather. Too big, but warm. I sat down next to her, notebook in hand, the kind we use to track inventory and tabs. I need you to write down everything you can remember. Dates, mamas, what he said, what he did. Her hand trembled as she took the pen. Don't worry about getting it perfect. Just get it down. She started writing. Her penmanship surprisingly neat for someone so young, so traumatized. My phone buzzed. Ramirez. Bear, you said emergency. What's going on? I looked at Sophie, at the folder, at the bruises. We've got a child abuse situation. Active threat. Need you here. Iron Brotherhood Clubhouse. Southeast Hawthorne. A pause. How active? Stepfather planning to kill her this weekend. We've got evidence. We've got the victim. We need law enforcement before this goes sideways. Another pause. Longer. I'm 20 minutes out. Don't do anything stupid, Bear. Yes, ma'am. I hung up. Vince approached, quiet, the way he moved when something was eating at him. Bear, you remember the funeral, September 2020. I nodded. You remember seeing her there, Sophie? I closed my eyes, tried to pull up the memory. COVID protocols, masks, social distancing, outdoor service, rain, and yes, a small girl, 5 years old, standing next to a man in a black suit, silent, no tears, just numb. That girl was sitting in front of me now, 3 years older, 3 years of hell etched into her skin. I should have known, I said, should have checked on her, should have. Vince cut me off, his hand on my shoulder. You're here now, that's what matters. But it didn't feel like enough. Didn't feel like it would ever be enough. Cass's letter burned in my pocket, her words echoing in my head. Be the Marine who doesn't leave a man behind. I'd left plenty of men behind. Vietnam taught me that sometimes you can't save everyone. Sometimes the best you can do is save yourself. But this was different. This was a child, an innocent, someone who'd done everything right, who'd been smart and brave and strong, someone who deserved better than the hand life had dealt her. Detective Elena Ramirez arrived in an unmarked sedan, no lights, no sirens, professional discretion. She was 45, Latina, sharp eyes that had seen too much, 18 years on the Portland PD, child abuse specialist. We'd worked with her before on a witness intimidation case back in 2019. She knew we weren't saints, but she also knew we weren't liars. Her brother had been a Marine, Carlos Ramirez, killed in Iraq 2004, IED outside Fallujah. She understood what it meant to serve, what it meant to lose someone to war. She stepped into the clubhouse, took in the scene, 27 bikers, one small girl, a folder full of evidence. Her expression hardened. The look cops get when they know something bad is about to get worse. She knelt next to Sophie, her voice soft, professional. Hi, sweetheart. I'm Detective Ramirez. I'm here to help. Can you tell me what happened? Sophie handed her the folder. Ramirez flipped through it, page by page, her jaw tightening with each new piece of evidence. Medical records, photographs, timeline, Cass's letter. She looked up at me, then at Sophie. This is extraordinary work. Most adults couldn't build a case this thorough. Sophie's voice was quiet. My mom taught me. She was a paralegal. She said evidence is everything. Ramirez nodded, closed the folder, stood. This is strong, damning even, but without catching him in the act, without direct confession, Richard might walk, or worse, supervise visits, anger management classes, partial custody. The words hit like physical blows. After everything Sophie had done, after 2 years of collecting evidence, after finally finding the courage to run, there was still a chance the system would send her back. I stood, My decision made. I'm going over there. Ramirez's head snapped toward me. No, you'll compromise everything. Any confession he makes, any evidence we gather, any statement he gives could be thrown out if a defense lawyer argues coercion. I kept my voice level. I'm not going to touch him. I'm going to knock on his door like a concerned neighbor. Ask if he's seen a little girl. See what he says when he realizes she's gone. Ramirez should have said no, should have followed protocol, should have kept civilians out of active investigations. Instead, she looked at me, at Sophie, at the evidence. She'd been a cop long enough to know that sometimes you have to bend the rules to get results. Body camera, she said firmly. Audio recording. You don't touch him. You don't threaten him. You ask questions. Let him talk. The second he lawyers up, you walk away. Understood. Yes, ma'am. Like I was back in the Corps, taking orders. Vince pulled equipment from a locked cabinet. Body camera, chest mount, audio recorder. Backup. He wired me up with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. We had different circumstances, but the principle was the same. Document everything. Build a case that would survive scrutiny. Crow positioned himself in a car across the street. Second camera, backup footage, just in case. Ramirez and her partner, Detective Liu, parked 2 houses down, close enough to respond, far enough to avoid spooking Richard. I checked my gear, body cam on chest, audio recorder in pocket. No weapons, no brass knuckles, nothing that could be construed as threatening. Just me, a 62-year-old Marine, about to go face a child abuser. Sophie watched me prepare, those big eyes tracking every movement. I knelt next to her one more time. I'll be back, I promise. In the Marines, a promise is everything. You keep it or you die trying. I walked out the door, 50 feet. That's how far Richard Caldwell's house was from my clubhouse. In Vietnam, 50 feet was point-blank range, grenade throwing distance, close enough to see the enemy's eyes when you pulled the trigger. I'd been that close to Sophie's hell for 3 years, and I'd done nothing, not anymore. The walk across Southeast Hawthorne took 20 seconds, each step deliberate, controlled. I was heading into enemy territory now, had to keep my head. The house looked harmless from outside. Small, peeling paint, lawn needed mowing, single story, built in the 70s probably. Vinyl siding, cracked driveway, the kind of house you pass 1,000 times without noticing. The kind of house where hell happens behind closed doors. Lights were on inside. 1 a.m., unusual. Most people would be asleep, but predators keep different hours. I climbed the porch steps, 3 of them, wood. Needing repair, the boards creaked under my weight. I raised my fist, knocked firmly on the door. Footsteps inside. Heavy, uncertain. The door opened. Richard Caldwell stood there. 5'10", soft around the middle, wearing sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. Smell of whiskey, not drunk, but not sober either. He tried to smile, the kind of fake smile people perfect over years of lying. It didn't reach his eyes. Can I help you? His voice was friendly, neighborly, the tone of someone with nothing to hide. Then he saw my vest, saw the patch, saw 6'4" of muscle and ink and barely contained menace standing on his porch. The smile cracked, just slightly, a hairline fracture in the facade. I kept my expression neutral, almost bored, like I was asking directions. Looking for a little girl, about 8 years old, dark hair, thought maybe you'd seen her around. I watched his face carefully, the way you watch an opponent, looking for tells, for the micro expressions that reveal what someone's really thinking. His face did something interesting. Not concern, that would have been normal. Human, the reaction when someone shows up asking about a missing child. Not confusion either, not the bewilderment of someone who doesn't understand. No, what flashed across his features was calculation. Pure, cold calculation. His mind working, running scenarios, trying to figure out how much I knew, what the right play was. She's sick, he said. Too quickly. The words rushed. Defensive. Sleeping. Can't be disturbed. She's had a rough week. He moved to close the door slightly. Subtle territorial gesture, establishing boundaries, asserting control. I didn't budge, leaned against the doorframe instead, casual, relaxed, my massive frame effectively blocking his view of the street. That's so I let just enough skepticism bleed through, just enough to make him feel like he needed to explain more, to justify, to defend. Because I got a call, concerned neighbor, said they hadn't seen her in a while, thought I'd check in. And here's where predators always fail. They can't help themselves, can't just say thank you and close the door. Can't let perceived accusations stand unchallenged. They have to defend, have to explain, have to make you understand that they're the victim here. She's fine, he snapped, irritation bleeding through the friendly act like ink through wet paper. She's always making up stories, that kid, attention-seeking behavior. Her mother spoiled her rotten before she died, let her get away with everything. He was talking, unprompted, digging his own grave. And I've been trying to straighten her out, but it's been difficult. You try raising someone else's kid. See how easy it is. I let the words hang, let him hear his own defensiveness, his own unprompted explanations. So you do discipline her? The question came out mild, curious. Like I was genuinely interested in parenting techniques. Richard blinked, realization hitting that he'd said too much, revealed too much, walked into something he hadn't seen coming. I mean normal stuff, timeouts, sending her to her room. You know how kids are. He tried to recover, tried to make it sound routine, reasonable, completely normal. I don't actually, I said, my voice still conversational, but with an edge now, something sharp underneath. Tell me how kids are when they need straightening out. The body camera on my chest caught everything. Every defensive statement, every unprompted explanation about bruises I hadn't mentioned yet, every casual reference to discipline and difficult child and needing to be firm. Richard talked and talked, digging deeper with every word. How kids lie, how they exaggerate, how sometimes you have to use tough love, how Cass had been too soft, how Sophie was troubled now because of it. And when I finally said, voice dropping to something cold and hard, funny thing, she's not in her room right now. Richard's face went white, not pale. White, the color draining so fast it was like watching someone have a medical emergency. Where is she? Not is she safe, not what happened, not did she run away, just where. Because his first thought wasn't about her well-being. It was about control, about knowing where his victim was, about maintaining power. Detective Ramirez stepped out of the shadows. Badge out, body cam recording, professional, calm, absolutely done with this man's performance. Richard realized all at once what had just happened. He'd confessed to child abuse on camera. He'd revealed his true nature to a cop and a witness. He'd done it willingly, unable to resist the urge to defend himself. The trap had closed, and he'd walked into it. Richard Caldwell, you're under arrest on suspicion of child endangerment and abuse. You have the right to remain silent. Richard's panic was immediate. Wait, I didn't mean this is a misunderstanding. I want a lawyer. Ramirez continued reading his rights. Detective Lou appeared. Moved to cuff Richard. I stood there, fists clenched till my knuckles cracked. Every instinct screaming to hit him, to grab him by the throat, to make him feel a fraction of what Sophie felt. In Vietnam, I would have put a bullet between his eyes and slept fine. But this wasn't war. This was civilization. And if I touched him, Sophie would pay the price. So I stood there, watched Liu cuff him, watched them put him in the car. Vince's hand landed on my shoulder. You did good, brother. You kept your cool. I nodded, but inside I was still in the jungle. And Richard Caldwell was Charlie. War never really ends. You just learn to fight it different. Ramirez approached. We're going to search the house. You should head back. Stay with Sophie. I turned, walked back across that 50 feet. Sophie was waiting, standing at the clubhouse window, watching. When she saw me, relief flooded her face. I walked inside, knelt down. He's arrested. He's not going to hurt you anymore. She threw her arms around me. First time she'd initiated physical contact with anyone since Cass died, probably. I hugged her back. Careful, gentle. The way I used to hug Elena. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt like maybe I could be a father again. The forensic team arrived at 2:15 a.m. 3 techs in white suits, cameras, evidence bags, the machinery of justice grinding into motion. Ramirez had asked me to stay with Sophie while they processed the scene. Probably smart. If I walked into that house, saw what she'd endured for 3 years, I might do something that would land me back in prison. Sophie sat at the bar, wrapped in Vince's leather jacket, too big for her. The sleeves hung past her hands, but she clutched it tight, like armor. Jake had made her a sandwich, turkey and cheese. She'd eaten half before her stomach rebelled. 3 years of starvation meant her body couldn't handle normal portions anymore. The clubhouse had gone quiet. Most of the angels had left, given statements to Ramirez's partner, headed home to their own families, their own beds. But the core stayed. Vince, Crow, Jake, Marcus Jr., Tommy Chen, the brothers who'd been there from the beginning, who understood what it meant to stand watch, to hold the line. Sophie's eyes kept drifting to the window, to the house across the street, to the place that had been her prison. Lights blazed inside now, crime scene lights, harsh, clinical, exposing everything that had been hidden in shadow. I sat next to her, gave her space but stayed close. She finally spoke, her voice small in the quiet. What happens now? Loaded question. What happens now covered a lot of ground. Legal proceedings, foster care, court dates. A system designed to protect children, but often failing them anyway. I kept my answer simple. Now we make sure you're safe. That's first. Everything else we'll figure out. She nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to trust. My phone buzzed. Ramirez. Bear, you need to see this. Something in her voice. Tight. Controlled. The tone cops use when they've found something that makes them want to quit their tune and find whoever did it. I looked at Vince. Stay with her. He moved to sit where I'd been. Grandfatherly. Safe. I crossed the street again. This time through the front door Richard Caldwell would never walk through as a free man again. The house smelled wrong. Stale air. Unwashed dishes. Something else underneath. Decay. Not physical. Moral. Ramirez met me in the hallway, her face grim. Sophie's bedroom is first door on the left. I need you to see it. Need you to understand what we're dealing with. I steeled myself, pushed open the door, 6 by 8 feet. Smaller than my prison cell in Hanoi after I got captured in '69. That cell had been 7 by 9. Concrete. One small window, rats. This was worse. Mattress on the floor, no frame, thin blanket. Torn, stained, no pillow, window nailed shut. I crossed to it, tested it. 8 nails driven deep through the frame into the sill. She couldn't have opened it if the house was burning. Door had 2 deadbolts. Outside, industrial grade, the kind you use for storage units, for securing valuable property, not for keeping a child safe, for keeping her contained. Light fixture hung empty, socket bare, bulb removed. She'd lived in darkness when locked in. No light, no hope, just black. I had to step outside, into the hallway, breathe. Flashback hit me like incoming fire. Hanoi, 1969, 6 months in that cell. Interrogations, beatings, the guards who thought torture was their patriotic duty. I'd been 22, trained for survival, mentally prepared for capture. Sophie had been 5 when this started, 6 when she began documenting, 7 when she learned to pick locks. A child with no training, no preparation, just survival instinct and her mother's final lessons. Ramirez's hand on my shoulder brought me back. There's more. She led me to the kitchen, showed me the cupboards. Padlocked, every single one, high shelves empty. Sophie couldn't have reached them even with a chair. Trash can revealed receipts. Fast food, restaurants, Richard eating out daily. Sophie's food section occupied one corner of the counter. 1 can of soup, expired. 4 months past the date. A sleeve of crackers, stale. In the living room, Detective Lou was photographing everything, creating a record that would bury Richard Caldwell. But it was the office that sealed it. Richard's home office occupied the second bedroom. Larger than Sophie's prison, nicer furniture, desk, computer, filing cabinets. The computer was still on. Forensic tech had already imaged the hard drive, but Ramirez wanted me to see the search history. She pulled it up on screen. Scrolled. March 2023. How to make child accident look real. April 2023. Oregon inheritance laws, guardian rights. May 2023. Life insurance investigation process. June 2020, Silver Falls State Park death statistics. June 13, 2024. Yesterday. Weather Silver Falls Saturday, June 15. He'd planned it, methodical, like a military operation. Silver Falls, Canyon Trail, 177-foot drop at South Falls Overlook. Accidental fall, grieving stepfather, insurance payout in 60 days. If Sophie hadn't run, she'd have been dead in approximately 10 hours. I checked my watch. 2:47 a.m., Saturday morning. Richard had probably planned to wake her early, make it seem spontaneous. Father-daughter bonding trip. The hiking gear confirmed it. Ramirez opened the closet. Brand new boots, Sophie's size. Tag still on. Backpack packed for a day hike. Trail map with a red X marking South Falls Overlook. First aid kit sitting on the shelf. I opened it. Empty. He wasn't planning to use it. Wasn't planning for her to survive the fall. My hands shook. First time since Vietnam. Ramirez saw it. This is premeditation. Attempted murder. First degree. We've got him cold. Her voice carried satisfaction. The kind that comes from knowing justice will be served. But I felt sick because Sophie had been collecting evidence for 2 years, building her case, surviving, preparing, and she'd been 14 hours away from dying anyway. All her intelligence, all her bravery, all her preparation would have meant nothing if she'd waited one more day. Lou called from the office. Detective, you need to see this. We returned. Lou had opened Richard's filing cabinet, found financial records, bank statements showing Richard was $180,000 in debt, credit cards maxed, personal loans overdue, loan documents, owed to Thomas Tommy Bones Marconi, known loan shark. Portland PD had been trying to nail him for years. The last payment notice was dated June 1st. 2 weeks ago, pay in full by July 1st or face consequences. Richard needed money. Fast. Sophie represented $747,000. $247 from Cass's trust, $500 from the life insurance policy he'd taken out. Enough to pay off Tommy Bones, enough to start over. All he had to do was kill an 8-year-old girl. Ramirez photographed everything, every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence, building a case so airtight Richard's expensive lawyer wouldn't find a crack. I walked back outside, needed air, needed distance from this place. Vince met me on the porch. How bad? One word. Bad. He nodded, understood. Marines don't need elaborate explanations. We stood there in silence, watching the techs work, watching them document every horror. Across the street, Sophie was visible through the clubhouse window, still wrapped in that jacket, still watching. She'd survived this for 3 years, in that cell masquerading as a bedroom. She'd done what I'd done in Hanoi, what every POW does, survive. One day at a time, 1 hour, 1 minute. Find something to hold on to, some reason to keep breathing. For me, it had been getting home, seeing Rachel, starting a family. For Sophie, it had been her mother's promise. Find the angels, they'll protect you. And she'd held on to that promise for 3 years. Through starvation, through beatings, through isolation. Until the moment came, until she had no choice left, and she'd crossed that street, walked into a bar full of strangers, bet her life on her mother's word, on our honor. Ramirez emerged from the house, pulled off her gloves. We're going to be here for hours, processing everything. But Bear, there's something else. She held up an evidence bag. Inside was a document, legal letterhead. Found this in Richard's desk. Safety deposit box key, registered to Cassandra Morrison, box number 447, Columbia Bank. My heart rate picked up. Cass had a safety deposit box. Ramirez nodded. Instructions attached. Can only be opened by Sophie Morrison upon turning 18, or by emergency guardians named in attached document. She pulled out a second paper. Legal will, dated August 15th, 2020, month before Cass died. I scanned it. Legal language. But the important parts were clear. Primary guardians, Marcus Bear, Coleman Vincent Russo, Jackson Hayes. Richard Caldwell, temporary guardian, pending review. Clause 7B. If any evidence of abuse, neglect, or endangerment emerges, guardianship transfers immediately to named parties. Cass had made it legal, had made it official, had built a framework that would protect Sophie even after death. Ramirez was already on her phone. I'll get a court order. Emergency access. This qualifies. Sophie's life was in immediate danger. She paused. Bear whatever's in that box. Cass wanted you to have it. Wanted you to protect Sophie. I looked at the will again. At my name. At the date. August 15th, 2020. Cass had been dying. Pancreatic cancer eating her from inside. Weeks left to live. And she'd spent those weeks building safety nets. Legal documents, letters, evidence. Planning for a future she wouldn't see. Protecting a daughter she'd have to leave behind. That's what mothers do. Fight for their children even when the fight seems hopeless. I folded the will carefully. Put it in my pocket next to her letter. 2 documents from beyond the grave. 2 pieces of a plan Cass had set in motion 3 years ago. Now it was my job to see it through. By 4:00 a.m., the initial search was complete. Evidence bagged. Photographs taken. Measurements recorded. Richard sat in county lockup. Bail hearing scheduled for Monday. But with attempted murder charges pending, he wouldn't see daylight. Sophie was asleep on the clubhouse couch. Finally, exhaustion had won. Vince had found a clean blanket, tucked her in gently. She looked peaceful. First time probably in 3 years. I sat at the bar, coffee long gone cold, watching her sleep. Crow approached. Quiet. The way he moved in the Gulf, sniper silent. What's the play, Bear military terminology? What's the mission? What's the objective? I didn't have to think about it. We keep her safe. We make sure Richard never gets near her again. We give her a life. Crow nodded. And if the system tries to take her, put her in foster care, some stranger's house? My jaw tightened. Then we fight. Legal. By the book. But we fight. Crow smiled. Grim. The smile of a man who'd faced long odds before and won anyway. Because that girl crossed hell to get here, we're not letting her down. He was right. Sophie had done the impossible, had survived, had collected evidence, had found us. Now it was our turn. I pulled out my phone, called Karen Chen, our lawyer, the one who'd helped us navigate legal trouble before. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice groggy. Bear, it's 4 a.m. I didn't apologize. Need you, emergency, child custody case, possible permanent guardianship. Pause. Then I heard rustling, her sitting up, professional mode engaging. Tell me. I gave her the short version. Cass Morrison, Sophie, Richard, the abuse, the arrest, the will. When I finished, Karen was silent for 5 seconds. Then she spoke, her voice hard, determined. Monday morning, my office. Bring every piece of documentation, every photo, every medical record, Cass's will, everything. Relief flooded through me. We can win this. Another pause. Bear with what you've described, with Cass's legal documents, with the evidence Sophie collected. We don't just win. We bury Richard Caldwell so deep he'll need archaeology to find him. She paused again. But Bear, you need to understand. Guardianship is serious. It's not temporary. If the court grants it, Sophie becomes your legal responsibility. For years, until she's 18 at minimum. I looked at Sophie sleeping on that couch. Small, fragile, broken but not destroyed. I thought about Elena, about the daughter I'd lost, the daughter I'd failed to protect. I thought about Cass, about her letter, about her trust. And I thought about Semper Fidelis, the motto tattooed on my forearm, the promise I'd made when I was 18 years old and thought I was invincible. Always faithful, always loyal, never leave a man behind. Sophie wasn't a man, she was a child. But the principle was the same. I'd taken an oath, 34 years ago, to support and defend, to protect. That oath didn't expire, didn't come with conditions. I spoke clearly, no hesitation. I understand and I accept. Karen's voice softened. Okay then, Monday morning. We'll make it official. I hung up. Vince was watching me, reading my face. You're really doing this, taking her in. Not a question, a statement, confirmation. I nodded. Cass asked me to, and I owe her. Oh, Sophie. Oh, Elena. Vince's hand landed on my shoulder. Elena would be proud of you, brother. Would she? I didn't know. Elena had been 7 when she died, too young to understand adult concepts like redemption and second chances. But maybe wherever she was, if anywhere she understood that her father was trying to be the man he should have been, the man he'd failed to be for her. Sunday morning came too fast. Sophie woke around 9, disoriented, scared for a moment before remembering where she was. Safe. Vince made breakfast, pancakes, eggs, bacon, enough food for 10 people. Old habit, military mess halls. You always made extra. Sophie ate slowly, her stomach still adjusting. But she finished a full plate, first time in who knows how long. I sat across from her, coffee in hand. Sophie, we need to talk about what happens next. Her eyes went wide, fear creeping back in. I raised a hand, gentle. You're not going back to Richard, ever. He's in jail. He's going to stay there. Relief visible, her shoulders relaxing. But the court needs to decide where you'll live, who'll take care of you. She looked down, picked at her napkin. Foster care. The word came out small, defeated, like she'd already given up hope. I leaned forward. Not if I have anything to say about it. Your mom left legal documents, a will, naming me and Vince and Crow as your guardians? Her head snapped up. Really? Hope, raw, desperate? I nodded. Really? But there's a process, court hearings, lawyers, probably a few weeks. I paused, made sure she was looking at me. In the meantime, you'll stay with a temporary guardian. Could be foster care, could be a relative. I don't know yet. Her face fell. I pressed on. But we're going to fight for you. We're going to make sure your mom's wishes are honored. We're going to make sure you end up where you're supposed to be. She studied my face, looking for lies, for false promises. I held her gaze, let her see the truth. Finally, she nodded. Okay, I trust you. 3 words, simple, but they carried the weight of everything. She trusted me, a child who'd been betrayed by the one adult who should have protected her, who'd survived 3 years of torture. She was giving me her trust. I wouldn't betray it. Monday morning, Karen Chen's office, downtown Portland, 16th floor, view of the Willamette River. I brought everything. Sophie's folder, medical records, photographs, Cass's letter, the will, Richard's computer search history, bank statements, all of it. Karen spread it across her conference table, spent 2 hours reviewing, taking notes, building strategy. When she finished, she looked up, her expression serious. This is the strongest case I've seen in 20 years of family law. The evidence is overwhelming. Cass's legal documents are airtight. Richard's guilt is beyond question. She paused. But there's a complication. The safety deposit box. I leaned forward. What about it? Karen tapped the will. According to this, the box can only be opened by Sophie at 18 or by her legal guardians in an emergency. Right now, you're not her legal guardian. You're a concerned party. She saw my expression. I know, but legally there's a difference. We need a court order, judge's approval, to access that box before guardianship is official. She pulled out her phone, started typing. I'm filing an emergency petition, arguing that Sophie's life was in immediate danger, that the box may contain information critical to her safety and welfare. Her fingers flew across the screen. Judge Morrison, she's former military. JAG Corps, Army, she'll understand. She hit send. We should have an answer by tomorrow. I nodded, frustrated but understanding. The system had rules, procedures, even in emergencies. Karen's expression softened. Bear, I know this is hard. Waiting, not knowing. But we're doing this right. Building a case that can't be challenged. Making sure when we win it's permanent. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing didn't make the waiting easier. Tuesday afternoon, the call came. Judge Margaret Morrison had granted the emergency petition. Columbia Bank, Wednesday morning, 10:00 a.m., Karen Chen, Detective Ramirez, and me, as named guardian in Cass's will, as Sophie's protector. We gathered in the bank's vault, sterile, cold, steel everywhere. The bank manager supervised, required by law, making sure nothing was removed improperly. Vince handed me the key, small, brass, worn from Cass's handling. I inserted it into box 447, turned, the lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was a manila envelope, thick, heavy. I pulled it out, set it on the table. Karen nodded. Permission to open. I broke the seal. The contents spilled out. Medical records, updated, from Cass's final months. Oncologist visits, dated May through August 2020. I picked up the first one. Read the doctor's notes. Patient expressed concern about husband's behavior toward daughter. States he shows unusual interest in inheritance details. Minimal interest in child's welfare. Second record, June 2020. Patient reports husband asked 3 times this week about life insurance payout timeline. Patient states she feels uneasy but has no concrete evidence. Third record, July 2020. Patient states I'm afraid. I think I made a mistake marrying him, but I have no proof. Just a mother's instinct. I pray I'm wrong. My hands shook reading those words. Cass had known, had seen the signs, had felt the danger, and she'd married Richard anyway. Why? Because she was dying, because she was desperate, because she wanted Sophie to have a father even if she wasn't certain he was a good one. Mothers do that, make impossible choices, sacrifice everything for their children's potential happiness, even when their instincts scream danger. Ramirez was reading over my shoulder, her voice tight. She documented her suspicions with medical professionals, created a paper trail. She looked at me. This is evidence, admissible, contemporaneous records. Proves Cass had concerns before she died. Karen was nodding. This supports the will, shows Cass's state of mind, shows she was planning for Sophie's protection. I set down the medical records, reached for the next item. A letter, longer than the first. Different paper, heavier stock. I opened it. Cass's handwriting. Same flowing script, but shakier, weaker, written near the end. I read aloud, so Karen and Ramirez could hear, so it could be documented. To my brothers, if you are reading this, I'm gone, and something has happened to Sophie. I married Richard Caldwell, knowing it was a mistake. I know how that sounds, but I was dying and I was desperate. Sophie needed a father. I thought I could make it work. Thought maybe I was paranoid, that the cancer was making me see threats that didn't exist. I was wrong. Richard is not who he pretends to be. I've seen the way he looks at my financial documents, the way he asked about my will, my insurance, Sophie's trust fund, the way he avoids bonding with Sophie, like she's an obstacle, not a daughter. I've made contingencies. This safety deposit box, a legal will naming you as emergency guardians, evidence of my suspicions, all pointing you toward the truth. I pray I'm wrong. I pray Sophie grows up happy with Richard, that you never have to read this. But if I'm right, if Richard hurts her, please, please be the family I chose for her. Bear, I know you lost Elena. I know you think you can't love another child, but Sophie needs you. She's already lost me. Don't let her lose everyone who could protect her. Vince, you've been my brother for 12 years. I trust you with my life. Now I'm trusting you with hers. All of you, Sophie knows who you are. I've shown her pictures, told her stories. If she ever comes to you, believe her. Protect my daughter. Make Richard pay if he hurts her. Give her the life I couldn't. With all my love and hope, Cassandra Morrison. August 12, 2020. I read it 3 times. Each time the words hit harder. Cass had known, had seen Richard's true nature, had married him anyway out of desperation. But she'd left breadcrumbs. legal documents, medical records, letters, all pointing toward us, building a case from beyond the grave. Ramirez wiped her eyes, professional demeanor cracking. She knew, and she couldn't stop it, but she tried to protect Sophie anyway. Karen's voice was steady, clinical, but I could hear the emotion underneath. This changes everything. The letter combined with the medical notes, the will, the first letter, it's a complete picture. She looked at me. Cass planned for this, built a legal framework, made you Sophie's guardian in everything but name. I reached for the last item, USB drive. Label read audio recording, July 2020. Ramirez pulled out a laptop, plugged in the drive. One file, dated July 23, 2020, 6 weeks before Cass died. She hit play. Cass's voice, weak, tired, but determined. Richard, we need to talk about finances for Sophie's future. Richard's voice, smooth, calculated. Of course, I want to make sure she's taken care of. Cass again. The trust fund is $247,000. It's for her education, her future. I'm listing you as guardian, but the money is locked until she's 18. Richard. I understand. And your life insurance? Pause. Why does that matter? Richard's voice shifted. Still smooth, but with an edge. Just being practical. Planning. You're dying, Cass. Someone has to think about these things. Cass. The policy is $300,000. Beneficiary is Sophie. Another pause. Then Richard. But I'm her guardian. I'll manage it for her. Cass's voice hardened. Richard, are you only here for the money? Quick response. Too quick. No, of course not. I love you. I'm just trying to be responsible. Cass. Because if you hurt her, if you're not who you seem, I have friends, people who will protect her. Richard's voice went cold. What are you implying? Cass. Nothing. I'm just saying Sophie has family beyond you, people who love her. Silence. Then Richard. I would never hurt her, Cass. I promise. The recording ended. We sat in silence. Ramirez spoke first. He lied, promised he'd never hurt her, then spent 3 years torturing her. Karen was making notes. This recording proves motive, financial gain. Combined with the search history, the insurance policy, the debt. It's premeditation from day one. She looked up. Richard married Cass intending to kill Sophie eventually. He just waited 3 years to avoid suspicion. The pieces clicked into place, the full picture emerging. Richard had married a dying woman, pretended to grieve, pretended to care for her daughter, all while planning, waiting, building toward the moment he could cash out. $747,000, enough to pay his debts, start over, disappear. All he had to do was push an 8-year-old girl off a cliff. I felt sick, rage and grief mixing into something toxic. But underneath was determination, cold, hard. Richard Caldwell would pay, not just with prison time, with everything. I gathered the documents, the medical records, the letters, the recording, looked at Karen. This is enough, right, to make sure he never gets near Sophie again. She nodded. This isn't just enough. This is overwhelming. We have motive means opportunity. We have Cass's suspicions documented by medical professionals. We have Richard's own voice proving financial motive. She paused. We have Sophie's evidence. 2 years of documentation, photographs, medical records, timeline. She looked me in the eye. Bear Richard Caldwell is going away for 25 years minimum, and Sophie is coming home to you. Home. Strange word for a 62-year-old bachelor who'd lived alone for a decade. But I was ready to make good on Cass's trust, ready to give Sophie the life she deserved, ready to be the father I should have been for Elena. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, to the promise, to the mission, to family. 2 weeks later, Child Advocacy Center, recorded testimony. Sophie sat in a child-friendly room, soft lighting, comfortable chair, stuffed rabbit Vince had bought her. Dr. Melissa Tran conducted the interview. 20 years experience. Specialist in traumatized children. I watched from behind one-way glass, Vince beside me. Both of us silent. Ramirez stood with us. This testimony would be critical, court admissible, used in Richard's trial. Dr. Tran's voice was gentle. Sophie, can you tell me about living with Richard? Sophie clutched the rabbit, her voice small but clear. He locked me in my room a lot. Sometimes one day, sometimes two. It was dark. The light didn't work. Dr. Tran, did he give you food? Sophie shook her head. Sometimes, when he remembered, or when I was good. He said I had to earn it. She looked down. My stomach hurt a lot. I was hungry. Dr. Tran, did Richard ever hurt you physically? Sophie nodded. He hit me when I asked about Mommy. He said she was weak, that I was weak too. She pulled up her sleeve, showed the healing bruises. He grabbed me here, when I didn't do what he wanted fast enough. Vince beside me made a sound, low, dangerous. I put my hand on his shoulder, steadying. Dr. Tran continued, patient, professional. When did you start collecting evidence? Sophie's voice got stronger. When I was 6, Mommy told me before she died. She said if you want justice, you need proof. She said nobody believes words alone, especially from kids. She looked directly at the camera. So I found a camera. I hid it under my floor. I took pictures. I wrote everything down. Dates, times what he said. Dr. Tran, why did you do that? Sophie's answer was simple, devastating. Because I knew someday I'd need to prove it. Prove he hurt me so people would believe me. 8 years old, and she'd understood the system well enough to know she needed documentation. Dr. Tran's final question. Why did you go to the Hell's Angels? Sophie's face changed, softer, hopeful. Mommy showed me pictures before she died. She said these men are your real family. She said if you're ever scared, find them. Her voice dropped. She said Bear lost his daughter. She said he'd understand, that he'd protect me. She looked at the camera again, like she could see through it to where I stood. She said angels protect people, and I needed protecting. Dr. Tran, were you scared to go into the bar? And here Sophie's wall finally cracked, tears streaming. Yes, I was so scared I thought maybe they wouldn't believe me, or maybe they'd send me back. Her voice broke. But I didn't have anywhere else. Richard was going to kill me. I heard him. This weekend. I knew it. She sobbed, the first real breakdown since that first night. So I ran, and I hoped Mommy was right about them. I couldn't watch anymore. Walked out of the observation room, into the hallway, leaned against the wall, eyes closed. She'd thought we might not believe her. After everything she'd done, collecting evidence, surviving 3 years, building her case, she'd thought we might turn her away. Vince found me. You okay, brother? I shook my head. She thought we might not help her. Vince's hand on my shoulder. But we did, and we will. She's ours now. I nodded, swallowed hard. Behind that door, Sophie was finishing her testimony, telling her truth, building the final piece of the case against Richard Caldwell. And when she was done, when the recording ended, I'd be there, to take her home, to keep the promise her mother had made, to be the family she deserved. 6 weeks later, Multnomah County Courthouse, August 1st, 2024, 8:00 a.m. sharp. The Iron Brotherhood showed up in force. 15 of us, clean jeans, leather vests, boots polished. We looked like what we were. Veterans, men who'd served, men who understood duty. Judge Margaret Thornton presided, 65 years old. Former Army JAG Corps, 23 years on the family court bench. She'd seen every kind of case imaginable, every flavor of human failure. But she'd also served, which meant she understood codes, honor, promises made and kept. The prosecution table held District Attorney Catherine Walsh, 52, 85% conviction rate. She'd built her career on cases like this. Protecting children the system had failed. Defense table held Martin Shepard, expensive suit, slicked back hair, the kind of lawyer who defended monsters for $600 an hour. Richard had used Sophie's trust fund to pay him. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Richard sat next to Shepard, orange jumpsuit, handcuffs. He'd lost weight in county lockup. Looked smaller than I remembered. Predators always do when their power gets stripped away. We took the front row, All 15 angels, silent, watching. The media called us intimidating, said our presence disrupted the court's neutrality. Judge Thornton shut that down fast, said concerned citizens had every right to observe proceedings, that she wouldn't tolerate discrimination based on appearance. Former Army, she got it. Sophie sat with her victim advocate 3 rows back, too young to sit through the whole trial, but old enough to testify when the time came. She wore a new dress, blue. Vince's daughter had taken her shopping. First new clothes in 3 years, probably. She looked healthier already. 2 weeks of regular meals. Safe sleep, no locked doors. But the shadows remained. Under her eyes, in her posture. 3 years of trauma doesn't heal in 14 days. Judge Thornton called court to order. The state of Oregon versus Richard James Caldwell. Charges child endangerment, abuse, attempted murder in the first degree. She looked at the gallery, at us. This court will maintain decorum. I will tolerate no outbursts, no interference. Justice will be served through law, not emotion. Her eyes lingered on me. Message received. Keep it together. Let the system work. I nodded once. Marine to soldier. Understood. Walsh stood, began her opening statement. Your Honor, members of the jury. Over the next 3 weeks, the state will prove that Richard Caldwell married a dying woman for money, that he spent 3 years systematically torturing her 8-year-old daughter, that he planned to murder that child and make it look like an accident. She walked to the evidence table, picked up Sophie's folder. The evidence is overwhelming. Medical records documenting injuries, photographs taken by the victim herself, a timeline spanning 3 years, computer searches revealing premeditation. She held up Richard's hard drive. Searches for accidental child death. Life insurance payout timeline. Silver Falls State Park deaths. She turned to the jury. 12 people, 7 women, 5 men, is ranging from late 20s to early 70s. The defense will argue reasonable doubt. They'll say this is circumstantial, coincidental, misunderstood. She paused, let that sink in. But the evidence speaks for itself. Richard Caldwell is guilty. And by the end of this trial, you'll know it beyond any shadow of doubt. She sat, Shepard rose, adjusted his tie, smiled at the jury, practiced, insincere. Ladies and gentlemen, my client is not a monster. He's a man who made mistakes, who struggled with a difficult child, who faced circumstances beyond his control. I felt Vince tense beside me, Crow's hand clamped on his knee. Steadying, Shepard continued. Yes, Mr. Caldwell used discipline, perhaps more strictly than some would prefer. But that doesn't make him a criminal. It makes him a stepfather trying to raise someone else's troubled child. He gestured to Richard, who'd put on his best sad face. Manufactured grief. The prosecution wants you to see a predator. I ask you to see a human being, flawed, imperfect, but not a murderer. He sat. Judge Thornton looked at Walsh. Call your first witness. The trial moved methodically, Walsh building her case brick by brick. Day 1, Detective Ramirez testified. Walked the jury through the investigation, the body cam footage of my confrontation with Richard, his defensive statements, his unprompted mentions of bruises I hadn't brought up. Day 2, computer forensics expert, presented Richard's search history, showed the pattern. March through June, researching how to kill a child and make it look accidental. Day 3, financial analyst, showed Richard's debts, $180,000 to Tommy Bones Marconi, life insurance policy on Sophie, $500,000, motive clear as crystal. Day 4, medical expert, reviewed Sophie's school nurse records, explained injury patterns, how defensive wounds differ from accidental, how starvation affects child development. Shepard tried, cross-examined every witness, suggested alternative explanations. Coincidence, misinterpretation, overzealous investigation. But the evidence was too strong, too consistent, too damning. Day 5, Walsh called me. I took the stand, raised my right hand, swore to tell the truth. Walsh approached, professional, direct. Mr. Coleman, how did you know Sophie Morrison? I kept my voice steady, factual. I didn't. Not until June 14th when she walked into my bar. Walsh, But you knew her mother, Cassandra Morrison. I nodded. Cass was a member of the Iron Brotherhood. From 2012 to 2020, she earned her place, worked veterans' rights cases, helped brothers navigate the VA. Walsh. Did Cassandra ever mention her daughter to you? I shook my head. No, ma'am, she kept that part of her life separate. We didn't know Sophie existed until she showed up that night. Walsh pulled out Cass's letter, the first one from Sophie's folder. But Cassandra left this letter, dated August 2020, 1 month before her death, naming you as Sophie's protector. She handed it to me. Can you read the highlighted section? I took the letter, hands steady despite everything. Bear, I know you lost Elena. I know you think you failed her. You didn't. You were human. We all fail sometimes, but Sophie needs you to try. One more time. My voice caught. First time. Cleared my throat. Continued. Be the Marine who doesn't leave a man behind. Be the father you wanted to be. Walsh let that sit. Let the jury absorb it. Mr. Coleman, why did Sophie come to you that night? I looked at the jury, at 12 strangers who'd decide Richard's fate. Because her mother told her to. Because she was out of options. Because Richard was planning to kill her that weekend, and she knew it. Walsh. And what did you do? Simple question, simple answer. I listened, I believed her, and I acted. Walsh smiled slightly. That's what Marines do. I nodded. Yes, ma'am, that's what Marines do. Shepard's cross was aggressive, tried to paint me as biased, as having ulterior motives, as wanting Sophie for myself. Mr. Coleman, you have a criminal record, correct? I kept my voice level. Yes, sir. Assault charge, 1985. Bar fight. Served 6 months. Shepard. And you're a member of a motorcycle club, an organization often associated with criminal activity. I didn't take the bait. Iron Brotherhood MC is a veterans organization. We support each other. We ride motorcycles. Nothing illegal about that. Shepard. Isn't it true you have a personal vendetta against Mr. Caldwell? I looked at Richard, at the man who'd tortured a child for 3 years. I want Sophie safe. I want her alive. If that's a vendetta, then yes, sir, I'm guilty. Several jurors nodded. The older vet in seat 7, Marine Corps pin on his jacket. He made eye contact. Subtle nod of respect. Shepard realized he was losing ground, changed tactics. No further questions. I stepped down, returned to my seat. Vince leaned close. Good job, brother. Day 7. Sophie testified. The courtroom went silent when she walked in. 8 years old, 90 pounds now after 2 weeks of regular food. Still too thin, but improving. She wore the blue dress, hair brushed, clean. She looked like a normal child. Until you saw her eyes, old eyes, trauma eyes. She took the stand. Victim advocate nearby. Dr. Tran beside Walsh, making sure Sophie felt safe. Walsh's questions were gentle, age appropriate. Sophie, can you tell the jury where you lived? Sophie's voice was clear, stronger than I'd expected. Across the street from the Iron Brotherhood bar, with Richard. Walsh. Was Richard nice to you? Sophie shook her head. At first, for a few weeks after Mommy died, then he changed. Walsh. How did he change? Sophie looked at her hands. He stopped giving me food. He locked me in my room. He said I was weak like Mommy. She looked up, directly at the jury. He hit me when I asked about her. He said she was a mistake, that I was a mistake too. Several jurors wiped their eyes. The woman in seat 3 openly crying. Walsh. Sophie, why did you start collecting evidence? Sophie's answer was simple, devastating. Because Mommy taught me. She said if you want justice, you need proof. She said nobody believes kids without evidence. Walsh held up the folder. And you collected this yourself for 2 years. Sophie nodded. Yes, ma'am, I found a camera in the trash. I hid it under my floor. I took pictures of the bruises, of the locks on my door, of the empty kitchen. Walsh. Why? Sophie looked at Richard. First time, direct eye contact. Because I knew he was going to hurt me, and I knew I'd need to prove it. Walsh's final question. Why did you go to the Hells Angels? Sophie's face softened. Mommy told me to. She said if I was ever scared, find them. She showed me pictures. She said Bear lost his daughter, that he'd understand, that he'd protect me. She looked at me now, those big eyes trusting. She said angels protect people, and I needed protecting. Walsh sat. Shepard rose for cross. This was dangerous. Cross-examining a child victim. But he had to try. Had to create doubt. Sophie, you loved your mother very much. Not a question. A statement. Sophie nodded. Yes, sir. Shepard. And you were very sad when she died. Another nod. Yes, sir. Shepard's voice went softer. Sympathetic. Fake. Isn't it possible you misunderstood Mr. Caldwell? That he was trying to help you, not hurt you? Sophie looked at him like he'd grown a second head. He locked me in a dark room for 2 days. He said I was weak. He said he wished I'd died instead of Mommy. Her voice didn't waver. That's not helping. That's being mean. Shepard tried again. But maybe you were confused. Maybe. Sophie cut him off. 8 years old and fearless. I wasn't confused. I was there. He hurt me. I have pictures. I have proof. She looked at the jury. I'm not lying. Shepard realized he'd made a mistake. Cross-examining her only made her more credible, more sympathetic. No further questions. Judge Thornton called recess. 20 minutes. I found Sophie in the hallway. Sat next to her. You did good in there. She looked up at me. Did I say it right? Will they believe me? I put my hand on her shoulder. They'd be fools not to. You're the bravest person I know. She hugged me. First time in public, first time she'd initiated contact outside the clubhouse. I hugged her back. Careful, gentle. We're gonna win this, kid. And then you're coming home. She nodded against my chest. Promise. I thought about Elena, about the promises I'd broken, the daughter I'd lost. I thought about Kaysen, about her letter, her trust. I thought about Semper Fidelis, about oaths that don't expire. I promise. Week 2, defense's case. Shepard called character witnesses, Richard's co-workers, neighbors, people who'd seen his mask, the friendly stepfather act. They testified he seemed normal, caring, concerned about Sophie. But Walsh destroyed them on cross, pointed out they'd never been inside the house, never seen Sophie alone with Richard, never witnessed what happened behind closed doors. Then Shepard made his critical error. He put Richard on the stand. Defense strategy, play sympathetic. Overwhelmed single father. Difficult child, doing his best under impossible circumstances. Richard wore a suit. Shepard had coached him. Look humble, remorseful, human. Shepard's direct examination was softball. Mr. Caldwell, did you love Cassandra Morrison? Richard's voice broke perfectly. Practiced grief. Yes, very much. Her death devastated me. Shepard. And did you try to care for Sophie? Richard nodded. I did my best, but she was difficult. Angry about losing her mother. She acted out. I had to be firm. Shepard. Did you ever intend to harm her? Richard looked at the jury, eyes wide. Innocent. Never. I would never hurt a child. Shepard sat, satisfied. Then Walsh stood. She approached Richard like a shark smelling blood. Mr. Caldwell, when did you marry Cassandra Morrison? Richard. March 2020. Walsh. 6 months before she died. How long had you known her? Richard hesitated. About 8 months total. Walsh. So you proposed after knowing her 2 months, Richard. When you know, you know. Walsh smiled. Cold. Indeed. Mr. Caldwell, what's the balance of Sophie's trust fund? Richard's lawyer should have objected. But Shepard was too slow. $247,000. Walsh. And the life insurance policy you took out on Sophie. How much? Richard's face paled slightly. $500,000. Walsh. When did you take out that policy, Richard? December 22. Walsh pulled out a document, Richard's computer search history, and 6 months later you searched accidental child death. Coincidence. Richard fumbled. I was researching. For a novel. Walsh's eyebrow raised. A novel? What's it called, Richard? I hadn't titled it yet. Walsh. Convenient. Mr. Caldwell, on June 13, 2024, you searched Weather Silver Falls Saturday. Why, Richard? I thought a hike would be nice. Father-daughter bonding. Walsh held up the hiking boots. Tag still attached. You bought Sophie new boots, size 2. Never taken her hiking before, had you, Richard? No, but Walsh cut him off, held up the trail map, red X marking South Falls. Then explain this. Found in your closet, X marks South Falls Overlook, 177-foot drop, fatal fall. Richard's composure cracked. I was planning the route, that's all. Walsh leaned in. Mr. Caldwell, you owe $180,000 to Thomas Marconi. Correct, Richard. I had some debts. Walsh. Gambling debts to a loan shark due July 1st. Isn't that right, Richard? Yes, Walsh. And Sophie represented $747,000. Enough to pay off Tommy Bones, enough to start over. She paused. Let the jury absorb it. All you had to do was push an 8-year-old girl off a cliff. Richard broke, voice rising. I was desperate. The debts Tommy was going to kill me. I didn't have a choice. The courtroom exploded. Judge Thornton's gavel cracked like gunfire. Shepard lunged for Richard, trying to shut him up. But it was too late. Richard had confessed. On the stand, in front of 12 jurors and a judge, he'd admitted motive, admitted the plan, admitted he'd intended to kill Sophie. Walsh sat down, satisfied. Shepard tried damage control, moved to strike the statement, argued his client was emotional confused. Judge Thornton denied it. Spontaneous confession, admissible. Richard realized what he'd done, slumped in his chair, defeated. Week 3, closing arguments. Walsh stood, addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Caldwell married a dying woman for money. He tortured her daughter for 3 years. He planned to murder that child and collect $747,000. She walked to the evidence table. The evidence is overwhelming. Medical records, photographs, computer searches, financial motive, and now his own confession from this stand. She turned to the jury. Sophie Morrison saved herself. An 8-year-old girl collected evidence for 2 years, built a case stronger than most adults could. Survived hell alone. She paused. She did everything right. Now it's your turn. Deliver justice. Find Richard Caldwell guilty on all counts. She sat. Shepard's closing was desperate, grasping at straws. Reasonable doubt. That's all you need. The evidence is circumstantial. The confession was emotional, not intentional. But his heart wasn't in it. He knew he'd lost. The jury deliberated 4 hours. We waited in the hallway, all 15 angels. Sophie with her advocate, Karen Chen pacing. 4 hours felt like 4 years, felt like Vietnam, waiting for extraction, waiting to know if you'd live or die. Finally, the bailiff called us back. Jury has reached a verdict. We filed in, silent, tense. The jury foreman stood. 60-year-old woman reminded me of my mother, Judge Thornton. Has the jury reached a verdict? Foreman, we have your honor. The clerk, on the charge of child endangerment, how do you find? Foreman looked at Richard, no mercy in her eyes. Guilty. The word echoed. Sophie grabbed my hand, squeezed. Clerk, on the charge of abuse and torture. Foreman, guilty. Someone behind us sobbed. Relief, gratitude. Clerk, on the charge of attempted murder in the 1st degree. Foreman, guilty. The courtroom erupted. Controlled chaos, joy mixed with vindication. I looked at Sophie. She was staring at the jury, tears streaming. She whispered, "We won. Mommy, we won." I pulled her close, let her cry against my shoulder. Behind me, Vince was crying too. Crow, tough guys all of us, crying like babies, because justice had been served. And for once, the good guys won. Judge Thornton gavelled for order. Sentencing will be held 1 week from today. Defendant remanded to custody pending sentencing. Richard was led away, orange jumpsuit, handcuffs, looking smaller than ever. He glanced at Sophie once. She didn't look away, didn't flinch. She'd won, and he knew it. 1 week later, sentencing. Judge Thornton looked at Richard, no sympathy in her expression. Mr. Caldwell, in 23 years on this bench, I have seen humanity at its worst. I've seen parents fail children. I've seen the system fail families. She paused. But you are a special kind of evil. You married a dying woman for money. You tortured her child. You plan to murder an 8-year-old girl. Her voice hardened. The only reason you failed Sophie Morrison's extraordinary courage and intelligence. She looked at her paperwork. I hereby sentence you to 25 years in Oregon State Penitentiary. No possibility of parole for 15 years. Richard's face went white. Judge Thornton continued. Furthermore, I am terminating completely, permanently, irrevocably any parental or guardian rights you may claim. She looked at him directly. When you are released, if you survive incarceration, you will have no legal connection to Sophie Morrison whatsoever. She nodded to the bailiff. Remove the defendant. Richard tried to speak. I want to appeal. This is Judge Thornton cut him off. Save it for your appellate lawyer. We're done here. Guards took him away, this time for good. Sophie sat next to me, watching, silent. When the doors closed behind Richard, she let out a breath, long, shaky. It's over, I nodded. It's over. She leaned against me, exhausted, relieved. Can I go home now? Home. She'd been in temporary foster care during the trial. Nice family, but not home. I looked at Karen Chen. She nodded. One more hearing, guardianship, tomorrow morning. I squeezed Sophie's shoulder. Tomorrow, kid. Tomorrow you come home. Next day, Judge Thornton's chambers. Different setting, less formal, but just as important. Present bear. Vince Crow, Sophie Detective Ramirez, Karen Chen. Judge Thornton reviewed the documents. Cass's will, the safety deposit box contents, medical records, letters. She looked at me. Mr. Coleman, you understand what you're taking on legal guardianship is permanent. Sophie becomes your responsibility. For years, until she's 18 at minimum. I met her eyes. Yes, Your Honor, I understand, and I accept. She turned to Sophie. Sophie, do you want to live with Mr. Coleman? Sophie didn't hesitate. Yes, ma'am, he promised to protect me, and he did. Judge Thornton smiled. First time I'd seen it. Very well. Based on Cassandra Morrison's legal will, the evidence presented and Sophie's expressed wishes, I am granting full permanent legal guardianship to Marcus Coleman, Vincent Russo, and Jackson Hayes. She signed the documents. Mr. Coleman will serve as primary guardian. Sophie will reside with him. Messrs. Russo and Hayes will serve as co-guardians with full legal rights. She looked at us. Gentlemen, you've just become fathers. Don't screw it up. I stood, shook her hand. We won't, Your Honor. Sophie looked up at me. Does this mean I can stay with you, for real? I knelt down. Eye level. Yeah, kid, you're stuck with us now, for good. She threw her arms around me, crying. Happy tears this time. I held her. This small, fierce warrior who'd survived hell, who'd saved herself, who'd trusted us with her life. And I made a silent promise. To her, to Quasal, to Elena's memory. I wouldn't fail this time. 6 months later, December 2024. Sophie's new life took shape slowly. Healing isn't linear. Trauma doesn't disappear because the threat's gone. But progress happened, small victories adding up. The house I'd lived in alone for 10 years transformed. Sophie's room occupied what used to be my home office. We painted it together. She chose lavender, said it reminded her of Cass's favorite flowers. New bed, real mattress, soft blankets, pillows. Window with curtains she could open and close herself. No locks on the door. I'd removed every interior lock in the house that first day. Told her she'd never be trapped again. Kitchen stayed stocked. Always. More food than 2 people needed. But I couldn't help it. Couldn't stand the thought of her going hungry. She still ate carefully. Small portions. Her stomach not yet adjusted to regular meals. But her weight improved. 95 pounds by October, 100 by November. School started in September. Portland Elementary, 4th grade. She'd missed a lot, but she was smart. Caught up fast, made friends slowly. Trust didn't come easy. But there was a girl, Maya, daughter of Jake's neighbor. They bonded over science. Both wanted to be forensic investigators. Irony not lost on me. Sophie wanted to help other kids the way she'd helped herself. Therapy twice a week with Dr. Sarah Kim, specialist in childhood trauma. Sophie didn't talk much at first. Drew pictures instead. The drawings were dark, locked rooms, shadows, fear. But over months they changed. Colors appeared, windows opening, people with smiles. Dr. Kim said that was progress. That art was Sophie's way of processing, of healing. Nightmares still came. 2, 3 times a week, I'd hear her cry out, rush to her room, find her tangled in blankets, sweating, terrified. I'd sit on the edge of her bed, hold her hand, wait for the fear to pass. You're safe here. Nobody's going to hurt you. Every night, same words. Do you promise every night? Same answer. I promise, semper fi. Marines don't break promises. Christmas morning came too fast. Sophie woke me at 6, excited. Normal 8-year-old energy. Bear, it's Christmas. Can we open presents? I stumbled out of bed, made coffee, smiled at her enthusiasm. The tree Vince had helped us decorate held presents. From the angels, from Sophie's new friends, from me. She opened them carefully, savoring each one, like she couldn't quite believe they were real. Vince's gift Italian cookbook. He'd been teaching her to make pasta. She loved it. Crow's gift chess set. Marble. Beautiful. She was learning strategy. Getting good. Jake's gift microscope. For her forensic dreams. My gift sat largest under the tree. Purple bicycle. Streamers on the handlebars. Bell. Training wheels attached but removable. Sophie stared at it. Silent. I worried I'd miscalculated. Maybe she didn't want a bike. Maybe it reminded her of Elena, of loss. Then she turned to me, tears streaming. Nobody's ever given me a real present before. Not since Mommy. I knelt down, put my hand on her shoulder. Sophie, you're going to get a lot of presents from now on. Birthdays, Christmas, just because days, because that's what family does. She hugged me. Thank you, Bear, for everything. I thought about Cass, about her letter, about her trust in me. Thank your mom. She's the one who sent you to us. Sophie pulled back, looked at me seriously. I miss her. I nodded. I know, kiddo. I miss my Elena too, but they're watching, and I think they're proud of us. We spent the morning learning to ride that bike, in the driveway, me running alongside, holding the seat. Pedal, keep pedaling, I got you. She wobbled, found her balance, started moving. I let go. She rode 10 feet, 20, 30, turned around, eyes wide with amazement. I did it. Bear, I did it. Her laugh echoed down the street. Pure joy, no fear. First time I'd heard her laugh like that. Free, happy, alive. I thought about Elena, about teaching her to ride, about the memories I'd cherished for 11 years. And I realized something. Loving Sophie didn't mean forgetting Elena, didn't mean replacing her. It meant honoring both of them, giving Sophie the childhood Elena never got to finish, being the father I'd wanted to be. Second chances don't erase the first failure, but they offer redemption anyway. 1 year later, June 14th, 2025, Riverside Cemetery. 1 year anniversary of Sophie walking into my bar, also Elena's birthday. She would have been 24. We gathered at Cass's grave. Sophie and me, Vince, Crow, Detective Ramirez, who'd become a friend, 15 angels. Sophie carried wildflowers. Cass's favorite, purple and white. She knelt at the headstone, read Cass's letter aloud. She'd memorized it, every word. Mommy, I found them, just like you said. They protected me. They kept your promise. Her voice steady, strong. Bear says I'm brave, but I learned it from you. You were brave first. She placed the flowers. I'm doing good. I'm in school. I have friends. I'm not scared anymore. She paused, swallowed. Bear tucks me in every night. Vince teaches me to cook. Crow teaches me chess. They love me, like you loved me. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I miss you every day, but I'm okay now because of you. The angels stood silent, respectful. These hard men with soft hearts. Sophie stepped back. I moved forward, knelt at Cass's grave. Private words, but I didn't care who heard. Cass, I don't know if you can hear me. Don't know if there's anything after. But just in case, I touched the headstone, cold marble. I got her. She's safe. She's happy. She's thriving. My voice roughened. You asked me to not leave her behind, To be the Marine who keeps his promise. I did. I am. I will. I stood. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for giving me a second chance at being a father. I won't let you down. I stepped back. Sophie took my hand. We walked to Elena's grave, 3 rows over. I visited every year. June 14th, her birthday. Sophie had asked to come this year, to meet the sister she'd never known. I knelt at Elena's headstone, Sophie beside me. Elena, this is Sophie. She's living with me now. Your room is hers. Your bike taught her to ride. I paused, wondering what Elena would think. I think you'd like her. She's brave, smart, tough, like you were. Sophie placed a flower on Elena's grave too. Small gesture, but it meant everything. Hi, Elena. Bear talks about you sometimes. He says you like strawberries. Me too. She smiled through tears. I'll take care of him. I promise. Vosvahanen. We sat there, 3 graves. 3 women who'd shaped my life. Rachel, my ex-wife, Elena's mother. We'd reconciled after the trial, not romantically, but she'd thanked me for giving Sophie what I couldn't give Elena. Presence, protection, a second chance. Cass, who'd trusted me with her daughter's life, who'd seen past my walls to the man I could still be. Elena, who I'd lost, who I'd grieved, who I'd never stopped missing. But grief and love aren't opposites. They're companions. You can mourn one child while raising another, can honor the past while building the future. We drove home, Sophie and me, convoy of motorcycles behind us, full angel escort. Sophie rode on the back of my Harley, custom helmet, purple, her favorite color, arms around my waist. The engine roared, that deep bass sound that used to mean danger, chaos. Now it meant family, safety, home. Sophie's laugh echoed behind me as we rode. Pure joy. I thought about the journey, from that night in June, 50 feet across the street, a small girl with bruises and a photograph, to this moment, 1 year later. A thriving 9-year-old who smiled freely, who laughed without fear, who trusted me to keep her safe. In Vietnam, I learned that life is fragile, that good people die and bad people survive, that the world isn't fair. But I also learned this brotherhood matters. Promises matter. Showing up matters. I'd failed Elena, failed to be there when it mattered most. But I was here for Sophie, every day, every night, every moment. Cass had asked me to save her daughter. I did. But the truth, Sophie saved me. She gave me purpose when I had none, family when I was alone, love when I thought I'd forgotten how. She reminded me that second chances exist, that redemption is possible, that a man can fail catastrophically and still find his way back. We pulled into the driveway. Home. Sophie jumped off the bike, ran to hug Vince, who'd arrived ahead of us. I watched her. This fierce, brilliant, beautiful child. Mine now, in all the ways that mattered. I thought about Cass's letter one more time. Her final words. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, to the promise, to the mission, to family, forever. I'd kept that promise, would keep it till my last breath, because Marines don't abandon their own, don't break their word, don't leave anyone behind. Sophie looked back at me, smiled, that gap-toothed grin that lit up her whole face. Come on, Bear Vince is making lasagna, I smiled back. Followed her inside, into the house that was no longer mine alone, into the life I'd never planned but couldn't imagine living without, into the family we'd chosen, the family that chose us back. The door closed behind me, laughter and cooking smells and the sound of brothers telling stories. This was home now. This was family. And for the first time in 15 years, I was exactly where I needed to be.